There are some words a mother spends her whole life waiting to hear. Not because she needs praise, not because she expects an apology, not because she wants her son to explain every choice he has ever made. A mother waits because, somewhere beneath all the years, she remembers the little boy who once reached for her hand whenever the world felt too big. My son is a grown man now. He has lived enough life to understand that some wounds do not disappear simply because time passes. He has learned that love can be beautiful and frightening at the same time. He has known the warmth of being deeply cared for, and he has also known what it feels like to lose someone he never wanted to lose. And yet, through all of it, there has always been something inside him that he struggled to say. I have seen it in his eyes. I have heard it in the pauses between his words. I have noticed it in the way he sometimes becomes quiet when a conversation gets too close to his heart.
For years, I thought perhaps he was simply protecting himself. Then one evening, he sat beside me, looked down at his hands, and said, "Mom, there's something I want to tell you." I remember that moment more clearly than I remember many of the important days of my life. I didn't interrupt him. I didn't ask what it was. I simply looked at my son and said, "Whenever you're ready, I'm listening." He took a long breath, and for a moment he looked like the little boy I used to know. The boy who would come running through the house after falling down outside, trying so hard not to cry, because he believed being brave meant pretending nothing hurt. I used to tell him, "You don't have to hide your tears from me." He would wipe his face and whisper, "I'm okay." And I would smile and tell him, "You can be hurt and still be strong." Perhaps that was one of the first lessons he carried into adulthood, because my son became the kind of man who could carry enormous pain without making it someone else's burden. He learned to love quietly. He learned to stay when staying was difficult. He learned that loyalty isn't something you announce, it is something you demonstrate when nobody is watching. And I watched him grow into that understanding. I watched him fall in love. I watched him become hopeful. I watched him dream about a future with someone he cared for deeply. There was a time when he came home with a different light in his eyes. He tried to hide it from me, but mothers notice things like that. He walked into the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, stared inside without taking anything out, and smiled. I said, "What's making you smile?" He closed the refrigerator door. "Nothing." I laughed. "You've been staring into an empty refrigerator for 30 seconds. Something is definitely making you smile." He shook his head. Then, after a moment, he quietly said, "There's someone." I remember how carefully he said those words. Not proudly, not dramatically, almost protectively, as if saying them aloud might somehow make the feeling fragile. I didn't tease him. I simply asked, "Does she make you happy?" He looked at me for a long time. Then he smiled. "Yes, Mom, she does." That was enough for me. I didn't need to know her name. I didn't need to know where they met. I didn't need to know what she looked like. I only wanted to know whether my son's heart felt safe. Because I had learned something over the years. A person can have success, money, recognition, possessions, and everything the world considers valuable, and still come home feeling lonely. But when someone makes your heart feel understood, when someone allows you to be imperfect without making you ashamed of it, when someone sees the tired parts of you and doesn't walk away, that is a different kind of wealth.
My son deserved that. Perhaps that is why his heartbreaks affected me so deeply. He never told me everything. Children rarely tell their mothers everything, even grown children. Sometimes they say, "I'm fine," when what they really mean is, "I'm trying to survive this without falling apart." Sometimes they say, It wasn't meant to be. When what they really mean is, I loved her more than I knew how to explain. And sometimes they say nothing at all. I remember one night when he came home later than usual. He walked through the door quietly. I was sitting in the living room. He saw me and stopped. "You're awake." "I was waiting for you." He smiled faintly. "You didn't have to." "I know." He sat beside me. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then I reached over and placed my hand on his. I didn't ask what happened. Eventually, he whispered, "Sometimes loving someone isn't enough." My heart broke for him, but I didn't say it. I simply held his hand.
He continued, "You can give someone your honesty. You can give them your loyalty. You can try to understand them. You can forgive them. You can wait. You can change. You can become better. And still, sometimes, two people don't end up together." I looked at my son. He wasn't angry. That was what hurt me most. He was sad. There is a difference. Anger can be loud. Sadness often sits quietly beside you. I said, "Did you stop loving her?" He looked toward the window. "No." Then he paused. "I just realized that love doesn't mean I have to stop respecting myself." I will never forget those words, because that was the moment I knew my little boy had become a man. Not because he had learned how to love, he had always known how to love. He had become a man because he had learned that love must include compassion for yourself, too. Healing didn't happen quickly. People sometimes imagine healing as waking up one morning and suddenly feeling free, but that's not how I watched it happen. Healing was smaller than that. It was my son drinking coffee in the morning without checking his phone. It was him laughing again. It was him taking long walks. It was him talking about the future without looking afraid of it. It was the first time I heard him mention love without bitterness. One morning, he came into the kitchen and said, "Mom, I think I'm finally okay." I looked at him. "Are you sure?" He smiled. "I think so." I asked, "Do you miss her?" He nodded. "Sometimes." "And does that hurt?" "Yes." He thought for a moment. "But it doesn't destroy me anymore." I hugged him, not because he needed rescuing, but because I was proud of him. There is a strange thing about being a mother. You spend years teaching your child how to walk away from you. You teach them to stand. You teach them to speak. You teach them to make choices. You teach them to leave the house and build a life of their own. And then one day, you realize that the greatest gift you can give them is not advice. It is the freedom to become who they were always meant to be. My son has always had a tender heart. As a child, he once brought home a small, injured bird. He placed it carefully in a box and came running to me. "Mom, we have to help him." I told him that sometimes we couldn't fix everything. He looked at me with those serious little eyes and said, "But we have to try." I have remembered that sentence all my life. Because he grew older, but he never completely lost that part of himself. He still tries. He tries to help people. He tries to listen. He tries to understand. He tries to forgive. And sometimes, I wish he would understand that he doesn't have to carry everyone. Sometimes I tell him, "My son, you are allowed to rest." He smiles. I know. But I can tell he is still learning. Kindness is beautiful. But kindness without boundaries can become exhaustion. My son has spent years learning that lesson. He has learned that being gentle does not mean allowing people to hurt you. Being loyal does not mean staying where you are not valued. Being forgiving does not mean forgetting every wound. And loving someone does not mean abandoning yourself. These lessons changed him. They made him quieter, but they also made him deeper. And now, when he loves someone, he doesn't love carelessly. He pays attention. He remembers small things. He notices when someone is tired. He asks questions and actually listens to the answers. He doesn't want a perfect woman. He wants someone real. Someone who can sit beside him in silence without feeling the need to fill every second. Someone who can laugh with him when life is light and hold his hand when life becomes heavy. Someone who understands that a relationship isn't built from grand promises. It is built from ordinary days. Breakfast, a tired conversation after work, a hand resting gently on another hand, an apology, a second chance, a shared joke, a quiet, "Are you okay?" and the willingness to stay long enough to hear the real answer. I think my son has finally understood that. Perhaps that is why he has become more careful with his heart. Not colder, careful. There is a difference. A cold heart doesn't want love. A careful heart wants love badly enough to protect what is precious. And then came that evening when he told me he had something he wanted to say. After sitting beside me for several minutes, he finally looked up. "Mom," he said, "I've spent a lot of my life trying to be strong." I squeezed his hand. He continued, "I thought if I didn't talk about certain things, they would hurt less." I didn't say anything. I thought if I protected everyone else from my sadness, I was doing the right thing. His voice became quieter. But sometimes I wonder if I was just making myself lonely. My eyes filled with tears. I wanted to tell him that he never had to be lonely with me, but I let him continue. "I've loved people, Mum. I know. I've lost people, too. I know. And there are things I wish I had said." I looked at him. "Then say them now." He smiled sadly. "That's what I'm trying to do." And suddenly I understood. The thing my son wanted to tell me wasn't only about one woman. It wasn't only about his past. It wasn't only about heartbreak. It was about everything his heart had carried silently. He wanted to say that he was grateful. He wanted to say that he had been afraid. He wanted to say that he still believed in love. He wanted to say that despite everything, he hadn't allowed disappointment to turn him into someone bitter. And perhaps most importantly, he wanted to say that he was ready. Ready to love again. Not because he had forgotten what happened before, but because he had learned from it. He looked at me and said, "Mom, I think I still have so much love to give." I smiled through my tears. "I know you do." He looked down. "What if I get hurt again?" I answered honestly. "You might." He looked surprised. I continued, "Love doesn't come with a guarantee that you will never hurt." He was quiet. "But you can choose someone who respects your heart. You can choose someone who doesn't make you question your worth. You can choose someone who knows that love is a responsibility, not just a feeling." He nodded. "And if I don't find her?" I smiled. "Then don't force it." He looked at me. "Love is not something you chase until you're exhausted. Sometimes you live honestly, kindly, and fully,
And love finds you when you're busy becoming the person you were meant to be. He didn't answer. He simply leaned his head against my shoulder. For a moment, I could feel the little boy inside the man. And I remembered holding him when he was small.
I remembered his first day of school, his first disappointment, his first dream, his first heartbreak, his first attempt to hide tears. All those versions of my son were sitting beside me at once. And I realized something. A mother doesn't stop seeing the child. She simply learns to see the man, too. I see both. I see the boy who once believed every problem could be solved with a hug. And I see the man who now understands that some problems require patience. I see the boy who wanted everyone to be happy. And I see the man who has learned that he cannot save everyone. I see the boy who trusted easily. And I see the man who now understands the value of earning trust slowly. I see the son who has been hurt. And I see the son who still chooses kindness. That is what makes me proud. Not that he has never fallen. He has. Not that he has never made mistakes. He has. Not that his heart has never broken. It has. I am proud because every time life gave him a reason to become hard, he searched for a reason to remain gentle. Every time disappointment told him to stop believing, he found a small reason to hope. Every time love left him wounded, he refused to believe that love itself was the enemy. And that, to me, is courage. My son has something he wants to tell you. Maybe you have been waiting to hear what it is. Perhaps he wants to say that he is still learning. Perhaps he wants to say that he doesn't have all the answers. Perhaps he wants to say that the person he once was is not the person he is today. Perhaps he wants to say that he has loved deeply, lost painfully, and healed slowly. Perhaps he wants to say that there is still a place in his heart reserved for something beautiful. For real love. For loyalty. For peace. For a woman who doesn't need him to be perfect. A woman who can look at him on his difficult days and still see the goodness inside him. A woman who understands that behind his quiet moments, there is a lifetime of feelings he doesn't always know how to express. A woman who doesn't demand that he become someone else to deserve her love. But I think there is something even deeper he wants to say. I think he wants to tell anyone who has ever loved him that he noticed. He noticed the patience. He noticed the kindness. He noticed the people who stayed. He noticed the people who believed in him when he doubted himself. He noticed the woman who once held his hand and made him believe that love could be safe. He noticed the people who walked away too. And although some departures hurt him, they taught him something. They taught him not to take love for granted. They taught him that every relationship is a gift, even when it doesn't last forever. They taught him that sometimes people enter our lives to stay, and sometimes they enter to teach us how to grow. My son has grown, but he hasn't lost his tenderness. That is the part of him I hope the world always sees. Because behind the man people may notice, there is a son who still calls me when he needs to hear a familiar voice. There is a man who still remembers small kindnesses. There is a heart that still believes that people deserve compassion. And there is someone who, despite everything life has placed in his path, still wants to love without pretending. That is what he wants to tell you. He doesn't promise a perfect future. He doesn't promise that he will never be afraid. He doesn't promise that his heart will never break again. He simply wants to say that he is ready to live honestly, ready to love honestly, ready to stop hiding behind silence, ready to let someone see the parts of him he once believed he had to protect. And if that someone eventually comes into his life, I hope she understands what I have understood for years. My son doesn't need someone to complete him.
He needs someone who can walk beside him, someone who knows that love isn't about possession. It is about presence. It isn't about controlling another person's life. It is about respecting their freedom. It isn't about never disagreeing. It is about learning how to disagree without destroying each other. It isn't about never hurting. It is about caring enough to repair what can be repaired. And it isn't about finding someone without flaws. It is about finding someone whose flaws you can understand, whose heart you can respect, and whose presence makes you want to become kinder. If that day comes, I won't ask her whether she is perfect. I will ask one question. Does my son feel safe being himself around you? Because that is what I want for him. Not fame, not applause, not admiration. Peace. I want him to have someone who can sit beside him at the end of a difficult day and simply say, "You don't have to explain everything tonight. I'm here." I want him to experience the kind of love that doesn't need an audience. The kind of love that exists in quiet kitchens, long drives, sleepy mornings, shared meals, gentle touches, and honest conversations. The kind of love that grows older without becoming smaller. And if he finds it, I will know. I will see it in his eyes, just as I saw it when he was a young man and first discovered what it meant to care deeply for someone. But this time, perhaps his smile will be different, less uncertain, more peaceful, because he will know himself better. And perhaps that is the real message he has been trying to tell us all along. That love isn't only about finding another person. Sometimes love is about finding your way back to yourself. My son has spent years learning how to do that, and I couldn't be prouder. So if he ever sits beside you and says, "There's something I want to tell you," don't rush him. Let him speak. Let him find the words. Because some people carry their deepest feelings for years before they finally feel brave enough to release them. And when my son finally speaks, I hope someone listens the way I did that evening. Without judgment. Without interruption. Without trying to fix him. Just listening. Because sometimes, the greatest gift we can give another human being is the feeling that their heart is safe in our presence. My son has something he wants to tell you. He wants you to know that he has loved. He wants you to know that he has been hurt. He wants you to know that he has forgiven. He wants you to know that he has grown. He wants you to know that he still believes in kindness. He still believes in loyalty. He still believes in the possibility of a love that feels like home. And after everything he has experienced, he still believes there is something beautiful waiting ahead. I know this because I saw it in his face when he finally stopped looking backward. He wasn't forgetting his past. He was simply no longer allowing it to decide his future. Before he left that evening, he stood at the door and turned toward me. "Mum?" "Yes?" "Do you think it's okay to hope again?" I smiled. I walked toward him. I placed my hand against his cheek, just as I had when he was a child, and I said, "My son, hope is one of the bravest things a heart can do after it has been broken." His eyes filled with tears. He smiled, and then he hugged me. For a long time, neither of us said anything. I didn't need him to. Because sometimes a mother's heart understands what words cannot carry. I knew what he was telling me. He was telling me that he was ready to live again, ready to love again, ready to believe again. And perhaps, most importantly, ready to let himself be loved. So if you are listening to me now, remember this about my son. Don't measure him only by what you see. There is a history behind his silence.
There is tenderness behind his strength. There are memories behind his smile. There are lessons behind his caution. And there is a heart behind everything. A heart that has been hurt, but has not become cruel. A heart that has been disappointed, but has not stopped hoping. A heart that has lost, but has not stopped loving. That is my son. And after all these years, I finally understand what he wanted to tell us. He wasn't asking the world to feel sorry for him. He wasn't asking anyone to understand every chapter of his life. He was simply opening the door to his heart and saying, quietly, honestly, with